You're tuned to Evergreen Media Network. I am Cindy Schwartz, and this is the Patient Partners Podcast and the Patient Partners Show. Jeannie Roller and I, my co-host in Indiana, I'm in Florida. We're talking about healthcare issues. We started the podcast, Jeannie, a bunch of years ago because of the horrific medical care that we got in this industry for serious diagnoses that we didn't, they sprung it on us, and not in a good way, of how we kind of navigated the system on our own because it's the only way we could. And people that we thought we could trust and avenues we thought we could trust didn't pan out for us, either of us, to really serious degrees. And so today, the topic that we want to talk about is how doctors are themselves starting to unionize because they do not like the atmosphere that they find themselves in. That's not a great thing to hear. And also how some of these facilities now are being built and owned by insurance companies, which kind of is maybe a conflict of interest. I mean, all of these podcasts are our opinion, research that we've done, people that we've talked with in the industry, and people that are patients themselves. We're all patients at one time or another. And just what we find that works the best for us at the time, if we can possibly, get better care, we try to do that, even if it's more of a holistic approach or if it's more of a not Western medical approach. So it's all worked for all of us, the people that are involved in this. It's not always take the pill, call me in the morning, and that's going to be your diagnosis or that's going to be your avenue that you're going to go. So, Jeannie, you got some interesting things you want to talk about. Let's get them going.
Well, yeah. One thing, Cindy, that I found was another article that talked about doctor burnout. That, it's overall, at more than 50% of all doctors have burnout, which is kind of alarming because you don't want to go to someone who has job burnout. There's different reasons, but one reason is that they're short-staffed. Not only do they have a shortage of doctors, but they seem to have a shortage of support help.
Okay.
And then we get into the thing of corporate-owned physician practices. And part of that is that we've been seeing more and more health insurance companies getting into the business of owning doctors. And, I agree. My personal opinion, that is a big conflict of interest.
I would think, yeah.
And recently, my mother went to her doctor, who is owned by one of these big insurance companies, and they had recently built a new facility. They have them everywhere now. And it is huge. I mean, it is fancy. It was not cheap, but
cheap to build.
Yeah, not cheap to build. And the inside was furnished really, really well, but the waiting room was massive. And I think they probably had 50 to 75 computer spaces along this corridor of just a long countertop for like MAs. I only saw one back there. They definitely had a shortage of people back there. And even before we got in, I was like, wow, this parking lot is empty. There are no patients here. I don't ever think I have seen that in a medical parking lot recently where it's empty. There was like 5 cars in there, patient cars. And so we went in, and as I said, MA spaces everywhere, but only one visible. They must have had that many exam rooms. They were all empty. It just floored me because in this practice, I think there's 3 doctors. There may only be 2 now, and they use NPs. But I didn't really see anyone else except the doctor that my mother saw. And, I was talking to him, and, he voiced the same thing that when I was talking to her cardiologist. He's not real happy. He is a family practitioner. So, they have one of the highest burnout rates of all specialties. It's just amazing to me that this is the way that medicine is going. My mother is in her 90s. She's healthy. She has been going every 6 months, but now they want to switch her to every 3 months. And I'm like, why? And she's like, I don't want to go every 3 months.
Mm.
And, in my opinion, they need to make more money, so they want people coming in more often. And basically, nothing was done. They took her blood pressure, and by the way, this is something we talked about before. The MA did use an old-fashioned cuff.
Yeah.
She knew how to use it, which was a plus.
Right.
But they really did nothing. My mother wanted her toenail trimmed because it's, an issue. And so the doctor said, why don't do that? Well, it used to be you'd go to the doctor if you needed, a toenail trimmed so it wouldn't become infected or something. They would trim it. No, I'll make a referral to a podiatrist.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, well, what do you do?
Yeah. What does the family practice consist of now? Yeah, I get that. It almost seems like, again, my opinion, that they've built the city. If we build it, they will come kind of thing, where we're going to coerce them into, or, whatever, to people to come into that thing. I hate to say that. I don't want to think it, but it's crazy. How can an insurance company now have medical stuff? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that just, and I know on Medicare and Medicaid that insurance companies get paid more if they can give you a chronic illness, like diabetes or heart disease or something. They can collect more money off of you, and for every chronic illness that you have, they get more money. They also, I know, Medicare has a set of different tests and procedures that they want done, shots, vaccines, whatever, and that is all extra money for doctors, and it's just amazing how much it's really the place was so large. It just reminded me of being so impersonal. I mean, it was empty. It was impersonal.
Yeah.
I was just amazed at the money, and I'm thinking, man, how do they pay for all this?
Yeah.
Because it's just so big and so empty. How are they? Is it going to go under? What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, it is something to think about. It is scary, too, because when you get to that point, did they ever tell you why your mom had to be there every 3 months as opposed to every 6 months? They give any substantial reasoning on why that would happen? No, they didn't?
No, she didn't ask, and I was already pressing for enough questions. On the way in, I was kind of miffed. My mother's very sharp. She's in her 90s. She moves slow. But the MA came out and called her name, and, I had listened, and they had called in a couple other people ahead of her, and I was listening, and they call them once, and people get up and go in. Well, the MA called my mother, and like 2 seconds later, the girl at the front desk started calling my mother's name just repeatedly. She didn't ever look up from her little computer, and MA was standing there, and I was waiting for her to say something, like she's coming. And finally, after, like 6 or 7 calls of my mother's name, I said to the MA, I said, you just checked her in. She's older and she has problems moving. And I said, if you would look up from your computer, you would see that she is going.
Yeah, well, I know. Sometimes it is. We're the mouse on the wheel there, if you will, and I hate to hear that. And, on a real quick note, we got a couple of seconds left. A friend of mine texted me today. I'd asked him, he had some problem, asked him how he was doing. He's like, oh, by the way, I got a serious thing that's happening, blah, 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 in his a leg, in his upper leg. And he's like, I didn't have the copay at the clinic or whatever that he went to, whatever they call it. And he said actually it was a good thing because they sent me to a smaller hospital and the care is phenomenal. So on that note, I guess it depends on where you choose. And that's what we talk about on these podcasts all the time. You got to really be mindful of where the good care is going to come from. You just never know. And it's, the insurance aspect with this, what you're talking about with this brand new big building, Jeannie, So on that note, I say, keep listening to Evergreen Media Network.